The fire cracked and sputtered in defiance of the ashen wind that howled across the plains of Zarian. 9. Skyscrapers lay collapsed like forgotten bones, their jagged steel remnants jutting skyward from a ground scorched and cratered. Overhead, the ruins of a dreadnought ship hung in eerie suspension, caught in the grip of the planet's unstable gravity well. Nothing moved, save for the twin figures crouched by the flames, an improbable pair in an even more improbable moment of stillness. Kale Draven tore into the hunk of meat with brutal enthusiasm, the firelight dancing across the etched lines of his cybernetic armor. Grease slicked his chin, mingling with soot and blood from earlier in the day, neither of which belonged to him. His eyes glinted like polished gunmetal, but they held no madness, only purpose. Opposite him, Seralith remained motionless. Her alabaster skin glowed in the fire's warmth, a stark contrast to the black bodysuit that wrapped her in seamless precision. Her ears, long and tapered, twitched at every distant creak and groan of the shifting wreckage. She hadn't touched her portion of the meat. Instead, her gaze was fixed on Kale, not with hunger or disgust, but with something colder. Calculation. "You're sure it was the Vorthog," she said, voice smooth, syllables precise as a surgeon's blade. Kale paused, licking the juice from his fingers. Felt like a mountain. Moved like a storm. Took 6 of my best blades to even scratch it. Burned half the forest trying to draw it out. Seralith's nostrils flared. The faint scent of ozone clung to the meat, beneath the char and smoke. She knew the stories. Every living soul did. The Vorthog was no mere predator. It was a myth forged in the blood of soldiers, a beast too smart to trap, too strong to kill, too ancient to understand. "And you thought it was a good idea to cook it?" He grinned, taking another bite. "What else would you do with a god that bleeds?" She didn't reply. Silence settled between them like falling ash. Kale leaned back slightly, flexing the carbon tendons in his neck. The firelight flickered against his plated chest, casting strange reflections across the dents and old battle scars carved into the armor. "You didn't come here just to watch me eat," he said. "No," she answered, though it was clear she hadn't expected the invitation at all. Her kind, those born in the crystalline towers of Aurelian, didn't accept meals casually. Sharing food was sacred, symbolic, binding. To break bread with another was to acknowledge a piece of yourself in them. She had come out of curiosity and suspicion. "I've seen you walk through hell and keep marching," she said, "but never idle, never indulgent. This," her eyes narrowed at the slab of meat resting on the flat rock near the fire. "This isn't like you." Kale's chuckle was low and humorless. "Zarian 9's changing. Maybe I am too." She studied him. "What did it cost you?" He looked away, not at the sky, not at the burning skeleton of the dreadnought above, but into the fire. "For days. A dozen drones. My left arm." He raised the limb in question. The plating was new, sleeker, darker, still wet in places with polymer resin. "And something more," Seralith said. Kale didn't respond. The wind kicked up, sending a spiral of embers into the night air. Across the ruins, the distant howl of some scavenger echoed, then was silenced. The world held its breath. Seralith finally reached forward. Her fingers hovered over the meat. Then she pulled back. "I can't. Not yet." Kale shrugged and continued eating. "Suit yourself." The air trembled faintly. Not wind. Not vibration. Something deeper. A ripple. Seralith stiffened, head tilting as if listening to music too soft for human ears. "You feel that?" she asked. He nodded once. "Started after the first bite." "What is it?" "I don't know. Doesn't hurt." "Not yet." She frowned. "Then why call me here?" Kale leaned forward, his voice lower now. "Because if something's waking up, I'd rather not face it alone." A moment passed between them. Not a truce, not peace, but understanding. "Tell me everything," she said. So he did. He spoke of the march into the red forest, where vines twitched like muscles and trees wept caustic sap, of following the trail of glassed earth and melted stone, the charred corpses of creatures that had wandered too close. And then, of the eyes. They weren't glowing, he said. They were remembering. As if the beast had lived 1,000 lives and seen every war Kale had ever fought. It didn't roar. It judged. And when he struck first, it didn't retaliate. It challenged. Like it knew this was the only fight that mattered. He told her of the struggle. How each strike echoed like thunder. How he'd baited it into the wreckage of the old orbital tower, rigged the supports to collapse, and buried the beast under 10,000 tons of alloy and fire. And how, when he dug through the smoldering rubble, it was still alive, barely. And then, Seralith asked, I killed it. Fast. Merciful. She didn't believe him, not entirely. Mercy wasn't in his nature. Not before. Not now. You know what happens to those who consume the Vorthog, she said. The flesh carries memory. Hunger. Power. Madness. I know, Kale said. So why? He didn't answer. The fire cracked again. The wind had changed. Warmer now. Heavier. Seralith's hand returned to the meat. This time, she didn't hesitate. She tore off a small piece, examined it, and placed it delicately between her lips. She chewed, slowly, swallowed. Her eyes closed. A hum threaded the air, subtle but growing. It resonated in the bones, in the teeth, like the distant thrum of awakening engines. Kale noticed it too. He looked to her, his expression unreadable. What do you see? He asked. She opened her eyes. They glowed faintly now, silver blue and unblinking. A door, she whispered. Old. Locked. But now it's listening. Kale's jaw tensed. So it begins. The wind rose again, this time bearing with it the low groan of metal shifting far above. The shattered wreck of the dreadnought creaked, its skeletal remains shuddering as if touched by some unseen force. Sparks flared briefly in the sky. Systems reactivating? Or something deeper? Seralith stood slowly, her form fluid and poised. She looked down at Kale, who hadn't moved. The fire cast both their shadows long against the rubble-strewn ground. You've done something irreversible, she said, and I've just joined you in it. He stood too, wiping his hands on his armor. I told you it wasn't just dinner. A thin smile touched her lips, humorless and ancient. It never is with you. Behind them, deep beneath the earth, something shifted. A heartbeat not their own. And the night no longer felt like it belonged to either of them. The ground trembled again, faintly but unmistakably, as though the planet were breathing differently. Seralith's boots crunched against the soot-blackened debris as she moved silently through the skeletal remains of what had once been a habitation dome. The glass had melted into serpentine rivers that now cooled in twisting patterns, solidified agony underfoot. She touched a nearby wall with her gloved hand. It was warm, not from the fires, those had died hours ago, but from something else. A pulse, a presence, as if the world beneath was no longer inert. Kale walked beside her, his expression unreadable, though his fingers constantly flexed in his new prosthetic. Every so often, his eyes darted to the edge of their surroundings, tracking movement that wasn't there, yet somehow was. He wasn't a man given to paranoia, not after all he'd seen. So when even he began to question reality, Seralith knew something was bleeding through. You hear it? He asked. She didn't need to ask what he meant. The low hum, barely audible, had grown steadier, like the sound of a forgotten machine resuming ancient functions. Yes, she said, and not just here. I feel it. Every time I blink, it's closer. Kale paused near a collapsed girder, crouching low to brush his hand against the cracked surface. The blood from the Vorthog had stained the steel, now drying into strange, iridescent patterns. Not normal blood. This left trails that shimmered in the dark, glowing faintly in a language no one had ever spoken. We didn't kill it, he said at last. Not really. No, Seralith agreed. You woke it. Kale stood, eyes meeting hers. You ate the flesh. You're part of this now. She didn't flinch. I chose to be. The wind whispered again, not words, but impressions. Echoes of thought layered into the very fabric of the air. Memories, perhaps, leaking from the Vorthog's dying essence, or something deeper still, the planet's own recollection of pain and conflict. Zarian, 9 had once been an outpost, then a battlefield, then a grave. Now it was becoming something else. A crucible. As they crossed into the shattered corridor of a subterranean facility, long buried under wreckage and roots, they found the door. A perfect circle embedded in a wall of dark alloy, unmarred by decay or corrosion. It pulsed faintly, in harmony with the hum in the air. It was listening. Kale stepped forward, placing his palm against the surface. It was warm, alive. It opened in my dreams, he murmured. A place with no light. A heartbeat in the dark. Seralith's voice was sharper now. You need to be careful. Dreams are not always yours when you feed on the dead. I'm not afraid. You should be. The door responded not with motion, but with sensation. A ripple through the bones, a gentle pressure behind the eyes. Kale staggered back as the alloy glowed bright and then dimmed. Symbols began etching themselves across its surface, spiraling inward. The same shimmering script as the blood. Sarilith stepped forward, whispering something in a language she hadn't spoken in centuries. The symbols paused, flickering, then rearranged themselves. You can read it? Kale asked. Barely, she replied. It's not a language, it's intention made visible. This door isn't locked. It's waiting. For what? She hesitated. For us. The moment the words left her lips, the door slid open with a sound like shifting stone and exhaled dust and memory. Darkness yawned beyond, yet it was not empty. The air shimmered inside, thick with potential. Kale took the lead without a word, and Sarilith followed. The corridor inside was unlike any structure Kale had seen on Zarian 9. Smooth walls pulsed gently with inner light, veins of color that moved like thoughts through crystal. There was no dust here, no decay. It had been sealed from time, or perhaps existing outside it. The humming grew louder, not in volume, but in presence. It was inside them now. Where are we? Kale asked. Sarilith's eyes widened slightly. A chamber of memory. Vorthog's lair, or maybe its mind. Shapes began to form along the corridor walls, projections or illusions. Not holograms, but impressions made real. Kale reached out to touch one, a vision of himself, bloodied and young, holding the body of a fallen comrade. The image flickered, then shifted. The same scene, but now with Sarilith in the background, unseen until now. Watching, always watching. He turned to her. You were there? Yes, she said softly. Long before we met. I've always known who you were. Why? Because someone had to. The path curved downward now, spiraling toward a central chamber. As they entered, the hum vanished. Total silence reigned. The air grew still and heavy. The chamber was spherical, its walls alive with slow, crawling veins of light. In its center stood a pedestal, and on it, an orb, pulsing faintly. It looked alive, breathing. Kale approached, each step heavy with the sense of being watched. The orb seemed to shift as he neared it, responding to his presence with flickers of light and flashes of thought. Images not his own. The Vorthog's last moments. A sky aflame. The sound of its kind screaming from beyond reality. A broken promise. Sarilith touched the edge of the pedestal. This is its heart. Not literal. No, but no less vital. It didn't just die. It left something behind. A key. Or a warning. Kale stared at the orb. His fingers twitched toward it. Don't, Sarilith said sharply. He stopped. Why not? Because it's not for you. It's through you. The orb pulsed faster now, reacting to her words. Lights spread along the chamber walls, illuminating more projections. Scenes of war, not from their history, but others. Alien armies. Beasts made of void and bone. And always, at the center, a creature like the Vorthog. Different shapes, same essence. They were guardians. Prisoners. Catalysts. It wasn't a monster, Kale said, voice hollow. It was a lock. And you've broken it. Sarilith's gaze hardened. We need to seal it again. Before the others come. He turned to her. Others? She nodded slowly. You felt it when you took the first bite. Something turned. Somewhere, the rest of them noticed. Kale didn't argue. The air was changing again. The silence was gone, replaced by a pressure, rising, steady, immense. As if something were pressing against the skin of reality from the other side. The orb trembled. Leave it, Sarilith said. We have what we need. Kale looked at her, then at the orb, then back again. If we leave it, someone else could find it. Then we bury it. Seal the chamber. This place was meant to be forgotten. He hesitated only a moment longer before turning away. The orb dimmed as they stepped back, its light folding inward. The hum receded like a retreating tide. The door sealed silently behind them as they exited the chamber, leaving no trace of their passage. Outside, the wind was colder now. Sharper. The sky above was darker than before, as though something vast now drifted between Zarian 9 and its sun. Kale and Sarilith stood on the edge of the shattered ruin, looking out at the horizon. Fire still smoldered, but a new sound had joined them. A distant scream. Not animal. Not machine. Something that had heard. Kale's jaw tightened. We don't have much time. Seralith nodded. No, but we still have a choice. And in the darkness behind them, something moved for the first time in eons. The stars above Zarian, 9 had grown dimmer. Not by distance or eclipse, but as if an unseen veil had been drawn over the sky. Kale adjusted the scope on his wrist as the bioscanner flickered erratically, then died completely. The surrounding air carried a charge now, metallic, almost suffocating, and the once distant scream had settled into a background frequency, like the universe itself was murmuring. They had climbed higher into the northern ridgeline, where broken cliffs overlooked the scorched plains. From this vantage point, Seralith could see the ruins they had emerged from only hours before. The ground there cracked wider now, subtle but certain, as if something beneath was growing restless. They'll come through there, she said, her voice quiet but assured. Kale crouched beside her, fingers tightening around the hilt of the plasma-forged blade strapped across his back. He didn't speak for a moment, gaze fixed on the slow, deliberate rhythm of the Earth's movement. It was no longer just a planetary shift. It had cadence, a pulse, like a being preparing to rise. They won't stop at the surface, he muttered. If the seal's broken, they'll reach the satellites. Spread from there. Seralith turned to face him. Then we can't just contain this. We have to end it. A silence hung between them, not of disagreement, but of finality. This wasn't the same kind of fight either had faced before. Not pirates, not insurgents, not bioengineered horrors. This was something ancient and intentional, and it had waited eons to be noticed. Kale opened his palm, and in the center was the sliver of the Vorthog's bone, the piece he had carved from its spine after the kill, before the feast. It pulsed now, faintly, a sickly violet. Once inert, it had become a beacon, a signal. He closed his hand over it. We still don't know how many there are, he said, or what they want. They don't want, Seralith corrected him. They respond. To imbalance. To weakness. We didn't just wake them, we invited them. Kale stared into the distance, jaw locked. Then let's uninvite them. The plan was reckless. So much so that Seralith barely offered resistance. It involved Kale entering the resonance chamber again, allowing the Vorthog's heart to draw the attention of the approaching entities, while Seralith used the ancient interface within the ruins to collapse the chamber, entombing the link between dimensions. But they both knew that once Kale entered, there would be no exit. Not unless everything aligned perfectly, and nothing had done that since the moment he bit into that cursed flesh. They moved quickly, racing against the tremors that now rolled across the horizon like thunder. Fissures widened behind them as they descended into the ruins once more, the door reopening before them as if recognizing its emissaries. The path had changed. What had been glowing veins in the walls now looked more like arteries, pulsing with darker hues, deep reds, bruised purples. The place was evolving, adapting. Still sure about this? Seralith asked. Kale smiled grimly. Are you offering to take my place? Her silence was answer enough. They reached the heart chamber. The orb had changed. It no longer resembled a relic. It hovered now, suspended by nothing, rotating slowly as arcs of light pulsed outward from its core in a hypnotic rhythm. It had grown aware. Kale stepped forward, his voice low. It knows we're back. It always did, Seralith replied. You're the key, Kale. But keys can lock or open. He placed the bone fragment on the pedestal. The reaction was instant. The orb flared brightly, then dimmed, the light collapsing inward. The hum became a roar. Seralith staggered, clutching the wall as the chamber itself began to quake. Do it now, Kale shouted over the sound. Seralith bolted to the console at the far end, her fingers dancing over the glyphs that materialized under her touch. Symbols shifted in response, resistant, but not defiant. The machine was alive, intelligent, and it understood desperation. Outside the chamber, a thunderclap cracked through the ruins. Not from above, but from within. A rift opened along the far wall, a tear in space revealing something monstrous on the other side. A shape that defied structure, constantly folding and reforming, part flesh, part shadow. One of them had arrived. Seralith turned to Kale. It's coming through. Kale didn't move. Then I hold the door. The being advanced, not walking, but flowing, its form unraveling across the stone floor like a living void. Kale drew his blade, the edge humming with stored energy. The creature hesitated. It knew him, recognized the scent of its fallen kin on his flesh. But there was no reverence in its pause, only evaluation. Kale charged first. The clash was unlike anything Seralith had seen. His blade tore through segments of the creature's form, which splintered and regrew in pulses. The chamber screamed around them as the energy from the orb rose to a crescendo. She activated the final sequence. The walls glowed with blinding white light. Kale turned to her one last time. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't afraid either. "Seal it," he said, and then he was gone. The chamber imploded inward, the orb vanishing into a point of blinding light before collapsing into silence. The earth above surged violently, as if the planet itself were sealing the wound. Seralith emerged hours later, crawling from the broken passage as dawn touched the jagged skyline. The sky was still dim, but the scream was gone. The hum was gone. Only the wind remained. She stood alone on the ridge, Kale's blade in her hand. The ground beneath her was quiet now, but not at peace. This was only the end of the first song. Others would come. The galaxy would feel the ripples. But for now, she had done what she could. A flare lit up the edge of the atmosphere. A distant vessel responding to her signal. She watched it descend, hand tightening around the hilt. Kale had cooked the beast. He had tasted its essence. And in doing so, he had drawn the gaze of things no one was meant to know. Seralith turned her eyes to the horizon. Her war wasn't over. But she had learned one thing. Some hungers should never be answered.